everybody. This is Ryan McClanahan with HistoryThroughCards.com. I hope you're all doing very well today. If you look at the Pittsburgh Pirates teams of the 1920s and 1930s, uh, these are some of my favorite teams to cover and study just because of well, they have some highly unusual ball players and circumstances surrounding the Pirates, especially in the 1920s and 30s. So I was reading more into what was going on in the National League up to World War II because I just find it absolutely fascinating, the history of baseball, really. There's two eras that I really like to cover the most. That is the dead ball era, and the other era is the 1920s up to about 1941. And so I came across a Pittsburgh Pirate pitcher by the name of Russ Bauers, and I was like, "Who is this guy? Like, I want to find out more about him." And he's got a really interesting career, and he only has one card that I'm aware of, the 1940 play ball. I've only found that one card, so today I wanted to tell you a little bit more about Russ Bauers, and I think you're going to find it really interesting. So here we go. This was written by SABR's Douglas Booge on November 1st, 2016. Northeastern Wisconsin's growth followed on the heels of the Midwest's economic hub, Chicago. Timber from the extensive white pine forests built the Windy City, while the growing metropolis's need fueled the economies of smaller lumber boomtowns peppering the north. Towns with names like Mountain, Sopperton, Pattis, Carter, and Wabano. In a similar manner, baseball's development depended upon pulling human resources from the wide open regions of the nation, bringing work and wages to the talent scattered along the back roads of this country. Russ Bauers became one such resource, a raw material that would be shaped in the forges of professional ball, escaping the low wages and hard work of his peers. Russ rode the rails to the big leagues in Chicago, Pittsburgh, and briefly St. Louis. Born on May 10, 1914, in the village of Townsend, Wisconsin, Russell Lee Bauers would witness how hard people could work for what they desired. His birth certificate gives his name as Leonard Alfred Lindquist, though Forest County records claim that on January 27, 1915, he was baptized and received the name of Russell Lee through spelling of the first name with the double L's became the norm. After Father Charles Lindquist died on August 9, 1917, Mother Frieda Inhelenfeld remarried George Bauers, and young Bauers assumed the Bauers surname. His stepfather labored as a foreman for the Holt Lumber Company and later operated a popular Lakewood, Wisconsin tavern. Russ's mother worked as a cook at a farm just east of Lakewood. That farm, now a golf course, offered young Russ a log cabin wall against which he could practice pitching. He learned to hurl at certain spots on the logs so the ball would bounce back to him, improving his control in the process. The Lakewood School only offered classes through 10th grade. George Bauers wanted Russ to attend his alma mater, a larger school 30 miles south in Oconto, for his final 2 years. In Oconto, Russ played football as an end and basketball as a center, along with baseball, graduating in 1933. In a district championship for Oconto, the 15-year-old struck out 19 in 7 innings for a decisive win against Green Bay's West High School. He also played for local teams. "I was playing first base with the Lakewood Town team," he told the Sporting News, "when our pitcher was knocked out of the box one day. When his teammates, who knew he could throw heat, asked him to pitch, he stopped the opposing team from any more scoring, becoming the pitcher for the club." Russ considered playing basketball, but he knew the cost of college would prove insurmountable, so he set off for greener pastures with the Chicago Mills, a semi-pro baseball outfit that played its games at 4700 Lake Street on the Windy City's growing near northwest side. With the Mills, Bauers, sometimes identified as Speed Bauers or Russell Bauers in the local press, pitched against a variety of opponents, including Benton Harbor's House of David team, Nashville Negro League champions, as well as teams from Indiana, Wisconsin, and Illinois. The off-season found him back home, working in the lumber camps. In 1935, probably lacking sound advice from anyone in the know, he signed a contract with the Philadelphia Phillies as an amateur. The inexperienced right-hander who batted lefty found an ally in Commissioner Kennesaw Mountain Landis, who granted Russ free agency, essentially ending the young Badgers' indenture to the Phillies on February 3, 1936. A month later, the 6'4" Wisconsin boy would become the 10th youngest player in the National League when he signed with the Pittsburgh Pirates. The Pirates' interest in Bauers was likely not accidental, fueled by player-manager Pie Trainer's scouting trips. Trainer had told the Sporting News, "We're going to spend our time hunting for a couple of fellows who can throw that ball past hitters with plenty of smoke on it." By 1936, Bauers showed up on Trainer's radar, even earning a comparison to Dizzy Dean from the Hall of Fame third baseman. That year, after being retrieved from their Scranton farm team, he started in one outing for the Bucks, pitching on August 20th and giving up 5 earned runs in 1 1/3 innings. The Sporting News concluded, "Bauers is promising, but he is still pretty much of a kid and may need another summer in fast minor league company before he will be ripe for the prolonged period of usefulness under the big tent." 1937, Bauers' true rookie year, seemed a harbinger of a great future. Destined for some seasoning in the minors, Bauer told the Sporting News, "Yes, I knew I was ticketed for Montreal, but I had already made up my mind that I was going to stick with the Pirates." With the help from veteran catcher Johnny Gooch, picked up as Pittsburgh's pitching coach, Bauers learned to throw overhand in addition to his sidearm delivery. Bauers' first win for Pittsburgh came on June 8th when his 6-hitter complete game bested the Phillies 8-1. Bauers made novice mistakes. One critic remarked, "Bauers would let up on certain batters when he should have been bearing down, but Trainer, Gooch, and others drilled him as hard as they could." Honus Wagner said of Bauers, "Now there's a comer. He's got a great curve ball. Fine young fellow, too, but awful bashful. Why, I'm about the only one on the club to whom he'll talk much. Just says yes and no to most people." On September 5th, the Northwestern Railroad hauled 300 Oconto County fans to Chicago on the Russ Bauers special, each paying $4.55 train fare and $1.65 for a box seat behind the visiting Bucks dugout for a Sunday doubleheader that Pittsburgh swept. The Northern fans witnessed Red Lucas, rather than their hometown hero, hurl a shutout in the first game, and Ed Brandt win the second. For the 1937 season, Bauers went 13-6, while his ERA of 2.88 from 187 innings ranked 4th in the National League and 1st for the Pirates. In 1938, he led the National League in errors committed by a pitcher with 6, while amassing a 13-14 record in 34 starts, with a team-leading 243 innings worked. His ERA, 3.07, ranked 8th in the league. Bauers peppered his mediocre performances with busts of exceptionality, such as on August 10th when the papers wrote that On one of his red-hot days, Bauers, who lost 6 of his first 7 games, didn't allow a hit until the 5th when Johnny Mize singled through the box. Going into September 1938, the Bucks had a 7-game lead in the pennant race, but the Cubs ended that with their near-mythic autumn, despite Bauers winning 4 in September, including a shutout against the Phillies on September 18th, in which he allowed only 4 hits. Reporters, many who played up his identity as a lumberjack, an Indian, and a wild thrower, kept track of Bauers' hijinks, hoping to label him a clueless rube, a clown, or a drunkard. Many noticed that Bauers' head simply wasn't in the game. A view supported anecdotally. In an exhibition game, Bauers lobbed a fastball to Joe Ducky Medwick, who stroked the ball out of the lot. He then consulted with his catcher. Gosh, that bozo sure smacked that one. Who is he? Russ gained a reputation as a guy who lived in the moment, doing little to understand his opponents or prepare himself for competition. Trainer had his mind set on improving his pitching staff, if not for another reason than to save his job. To this end, he swapped catchers, sending Al Todd to Boston for Ray Mueller. The manager reasoned Mueller is magic with pitchers, and that's what we need most. 3 of the moundsmen, Russ Bauers, Joe Bowman, and Bob Klinger, need a soothing voice and a smart teammate to study them in the pitches. If Mueller can do that, Pittsburgh will be greatly strengthened defensively. The triad of hurlers had won 28 games in 1938, and Trainer figured they'd win 40 in 1939, when they collectively went 26 and 35. In 1939, Russ only played in 15 games, winning 2 and losing 4. Nagging injuries in his arm hampered his play and kept him benched. After the successful 1937 and 1938 seasons, management began to see Bauers as a problem that needed solving. Bauers did little to help himself, committing more errors off the field than on. Early in 1938, he burned his hand lighting a match. On a train trip, he wrenched his left knee wrestling with one of the Weiner brothers, leading to suspension without pay until he could pitch again. On December 4th, 1939, he totaled his Buick sedan on the icy roads south of Carter, Wisconsin, a few miles from his birthplace. Bauers lost a lot of blood and smacked his head, giving doctors a good reason to worry about his welfare. But Bauers bounced back, perhaps too quickly for his own good. His career may have benefited from more time for recuperation. Before 1939 closed shop, Bauers decided he'd recovered from the accident, writing Pirates Club president Bill Bernswanger that he received only a slight cut on the side of his head and that he was feeling fine and in good shape. By February, he was planning on proving his mettle at spring training in San Bernardino, California, though refusing to sign his contract until he felt his arm had fully recovered, as he wanted to avoid going through another season like that of 1939. Manager Frankie Frisch, who as a rule refused to take unsigned players to training camp, made an exception in Bauers' case and found himself pleased with Russ's performance in an exhibition game against Chicago White Sox in Kansas City. Bauers signed his contract in April. He pitched 32 and third innings that season for the Pirates, with 2 losses and 0 wins. On January 25th, 1941, Russ married a young woman he'd met at dances in Townsend, Virginia Guyder of nearby Wabno. The newlyweds recognized that 1941 was a time to take the game more seriously. In June, though, he was sent to Jersey City's International League team to cure his erratic pitching. The Associated Press reported, Russ simply was too good to release outright, yet too wild to be useful. Bauers pitched only 37 and one-third innings for Pittsburgh that season, adding 1 win and 3 losses in his totals. 1942 found Bauers back in the minors, throwing for the Albany Senators of the Eastern Region, where a late-season surge, which included 6 wins in a row and back-to-back two-hitters, prompted a recall to the Pirates at the close of the season. Around this time, X-rays revealed a growth responsible for the arm pain that hampered Bauers' pitching, a problem remedied with simple surgery. He didn't work in the big leagues in 1942 or the next 3 years, as he was inducted into the military service early on May 31st, 1943. During training, Bauers pitched for the Camp Grant team in Illinois. Then in January 1944, he joined the Detachment Medical Depot for the 90th General Hospital in England. His unit followed the Allied services until VE Day. Private Bauers learned of Germany's surrender on French soil. That summer, he suited up for the Overseas Invasion Service Expedition All-Stars. 2 major leaguers, Bauers and Subway Sam Nahum, 2 Negro League stars, Leon Day of the Newark Eagles and Kansas City Monarch Willard Brown, another Hall of Famer, and various enlistees who played their way to the European Theater World Series in September against a Third Army team stacked with pros, including Harry Walker and Ewell Blackwell. The underdog OISE All-Stars lost in the first game in Nuremberg's Hitler's Youth Stadium, which had been renovated and rechristened Soldiers Field, but came back to win the second. The series moved to France, where the teams split a pair to tie the series at 2-2. The Third Army team, the Red Circles, opted for the fifth game in Nuremberg. Down by 1 run, Nahum allowed the Third Army to load the bases in the fourth before wisely taking himself off the mound. Bauers took over, pulling the All-Stars out of the fix and holding their opponents scoreless for the remainder. The desegregated OISE All-Stars celebrated their ETO World Series victory in France, all joining Brigadier General Charles Thrasher for steaks and champagne. Aboard the Maryville Victory, Army Staff Sergeant Russell Bauers returned from the war, steaming from Marseille, arriving in New York City on December 16, 1945. If he had dreamed of rejoining the crew of the Pirates, he only had 3 months to savor those fantasies. Sports writer Robert Weintraub characterized as early in 1946 as a time of ulcers and nail biting for many ball players. Never had so many been after so few jobs. Nobody felt safe. Pre-war players vied with their wartime replacements, as well as new cohort of players with more talent to choose from. The overcrowded majors were getting ready to clean house. On March 21st, 1946, Ray L. Kennedy, the Bucks general manager, released several players, including Bauers, who would not join the club for spring training. By now a veteran in 2 senses of the word, Bauers had to find another mound. Fortunately, the Chicago Cubs picked him up on July 3rd, 1946, and he pitched in 15 games for the season, although only starting in 2. For one of those starts, on September 2nd, found Bauers throwing all 9 for a 7-3 decision, his first win as a Cub against his former employer, the Pirates, at Forbes Field. Russ seemed back in form, giving up 7 hits but only 3 earned runs, while knocking a right field double that drove Bill Nicholson and Murph Rickert home for 2 RBIs. With the Cubs taking 3rd place in the National League, Russ Bauers took home $294.33, his share of the commissioner's dispersal of World Series receipts. The Cubs let Bauers go on October 5th, 1948. From 1949 to 1951, he worked for the St. Louis Browns, pitching in only one game as a major leaguer, a 12-4 trouncing by the Philadelphia Athletics. On May 6, 1950, Russ pitched the final 2 innings. 1950 also found him hurling in the Cuban Winter League. He went 13-6 for the Baltimore Orioles minor league team in 1950, leading some to reason that the Browns, who rarely won more than 60 games in a season, 58-96 in 1950, might improve in 1951 when they went 52-102. But St. Louis released Bauers to the International League's Toronto franchise on April 10, 1951. For the remainder of the 1951 season, Bauers pitched for the International League's Maple Leafs. In July, he tossed 7 innings of no-hit ball against the Springfield Cubs. The first Cubs batter in the eighth, Jackie Walesa, hit a shot that Bauers bungled, but the scorer scribbled as an error, riling up the Cubs fans. Fortunately for them, the next Cubby singled to left with the Cubs dugout sarcastically yelling, "Error!" Russ salvaged the 1-0 win, but Bauer's main problem with the Leafs was finding offensive support. When he lost, it was commonly by a single run in a low-scoring game. A few powerhouses behind him might have elevated Russ back into the majors. In 1955, Russ tried his hand at managing a Basin League team in Chamberlain, South Dakota, but decided he'd had enough baseball when the season ended. Reynolds Aluminum pursued him to take at an office position for them in Chicago. Bauers wanted to work with his hands, so he talked them into letting him fix equipment, which he did until retiring in 1978. Over the course of 15 years in and out of the majors, Russ Bauers pitched 129 major league games, all but one in the National League. He earned a career ERA of 3.53 and won 31 and lost 30 and had 300 strikeouts and 599 innings worked. Years after playing, he identified Eno Slaughter as the toughest hitter he ever faced. On January 21st, 1995, at the Edward Hines Jr. Veterans Administration Hospital of Marywood, Illinois, Russ Bauers' heart failed. His wife, Virginia, joined him in death in 2012, while his children, Andrea Prusky and Bob Bauers, still live, along with numerous grandchildren, great-grandchildren as well. Russ and Virginia are interred in Wabano's Trinity Evangelical Lutheran Cemetery beneath a granite monument depicting a swinging batter and praying hands. I really wanted to know more about Russ Bauers and what was going on with the Pittsburgh Pirates back in the mid to late 1930s. These teams were actually very, very good, especially with their hitting. They had the Wayner brothers, Lloyd and Paul Wayner. Most feel that Paul was a legitimate Hall of Famer, while Lloyd was really kind of riding on his coattails. I'm not sure about that. I'm going to have to study a little bit more, probably do a video on those two guys. Everything I've heard about the Wayner brothers and the 1920s Pirates seems like it's something out of a movie. I mean, you have a guy on the Pirates, their catcher, Oil Smith, who found himself basically thrown out of a window at a hotel. Just the partying that these guys did and the hard drinking is just incredible. And it leaches over to the 1930s. And, this is kind of also the tail end of the Wayners, too. But they also had Archie Vaughan, too. And Archie Vaughan, I'd probably do a video on him. I really like Archie Vaughan's story and his career. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't know Archie Vaughan, but he is one of the premier hitters of the National League in the 1930s and won I believe, the batting title in 1935. But he also is one of the best shortstops, aside from his mentor, which was Honus Wagner. And so like his he was really forgotten about up until like maybe I think 1985 is when he got in the Hall of Fame. Virtually forgotten about, and a lot of these players too, if they're not named DiMaggio or Ted Williams, uh, or Mickey Mantle, a lot of these guys are forgotten about, or people just don't even know the names, like Mr. Bauer here, and so generally enjoy researching your lesser known ball players, regardless of sport. Every ball player has a story, every person has a story, and I want to try to cover some of your lesser known guys and just find out more about their careers. This guy has one card, and it's in the 1940 play ball, but somebody over at Gum Inc. thought highly enough of Russell Bauers to include him in that set. So he was must have been a popular ball player, and also on these Pirates teams too. You have L.B. Fletcher. He was a first baseman, and he was actually quite good. And I'll probably do a video on him. But these teams, these Pirates teams, in the 1930s, they had really strong hitting and really strong lineups. But as you can see here, and what I just read to you, their pitching was suspect. I mean, highly suspect, and they actually caused the collapse of the 1938 season, in which they were battling for a spot at the pennant. Obviously, the Cubs won the pennant that year in 1938 with Gabby Hartnett's homer in the Gloman, and I'll probably cover that too. The National League, what's going on in the National League in the mid to late 1930s is also very fascinating too. Really kind of unlike the American League. I'm not going to say the American League was smooth sailing, but compared to National League, you had a major scandal in the Cardinals organization that had that not occurred, things in the National League could have played out differently. Different teams uh, could have had different outcomes, and one of those could have been the Pirates. And so what Branch Rickey was doing was when he founded the minor league system, he was hiding ball players and associations with minor league teams from Commissioner Landis. And once Commissioner Landis started his investigation, he had his lawyer basically like find a legal way break up this cardinal monopoly, if you will, and do it in a way that wasn't going to ban Branch Rickey from baseball, which, in my opinion, Branch Rickey should have been banned from baseball. Other than this, because he was doing some shady, shady stuff. The only thing I think that kept Branch Rickey out of major trouble was the fact that he was a lawyer, and that again, like uh, Kennesaw Mountain Landis was a lawyer too, but Landis did some really shady stuff as well. So uh, I I thought that that was an interesting aspect of the National League. Once that Landis ended up basically breaking up this quote unquote monopoly and releasing about 90 ball players, these guys couldn't get to the major leagues, and it affected one guy in particular, which already did a video on, by the name of Benny McCoy. Uh, it was released to the press, and the press had a field day with this. But I think it really did affect the National League quite a bit, and it was actually through the Cardinals to the Detroit Tigers, and I believe another organization, and definitely the minor leagues, which again, Branch Rickey hid his association, or the Cardinals Association, with a lot of these minor league teams. They probably had some really great pitching, but again, like we'll never really know. Johnny Sane was also involved in this too. A lot of those guys who couldn't get to the major leagues because the Cardinals were not sending them up or trading them, um, that definitely could have hindered the Pirates. And The Pirates also had a guy named Vince DiMaggio too, which I think plays into this. Vince DiMaggio is the oldest brother of Dom and Joe DiMaggio, and I'll definitely do a video on Vince because nobody talks about Vince DiMaggio these days. I can't imagine the players that Mr. Bauers here played for and against, and the stories that he must have had as a ball player. I would have loved to have just have a beer with this guy and just ask him about like all of what was going on during his career in the National Leagues in the late 1930s. Again, it's mentioned also in this article that Russ Bauers really couldn't get back into baseball. He had a very difficult time after World War II, like a lot of guys did, not just him. But a lot of these guys found out that they weren't getting back into Major League Baseball as they would have today because of their military service, and that actually went through the legal system as well, player by player though, not like I think Johnny Gardella or Danny Gardella, yeah, right, Danny Gardella was one of the New York Giants players who sued Major League Baseball to get back into his ball club, the Giants, and it took him a long time. And some of these guys jumped to the Mexican League in 1946 through 1947, I believe. A lot of them actually got banned from baseball for about 5 years or so because they just either couldn't get back into Major League Baseball or they found out that the Mexican League was paying more money and these guys could play probably longer. And then a lot of these guys were also going to the Pacific Coast League because there were more games to be played, and they just found life easier in California and the West Coast. So that's an interesting aspect too here. I don't see that really going on here though with Russ Bauers being in the Pacific Coast League, or what was going on really afterwards. But a lot of those guys really kind of had to sue Major League Baseball after World War II to keep their jobs. There was no job security. Obviously, there's no real job security even today, but it was even more difficult too for your non-established ball players, or even sometimes your established ball players like this guy right here. And a lot of times too, I had noticed in the press that there were a lot of veterans coming back from World War II. You're not who are playing baseball or anything, but a lot of these guys who would be drafted and they would come back and they couldn't get their jobs back and they'd have to sue to get their jobs back. So that was actually rampant in like 1946, 47, and even 1948. And that's something that a lot of like people don't really understand or even like have heard that a lot of times there weren't really veterans benefits or anything like that for these guys coming back uh, to stateside. So anyway, guys, I thought this was really interesting. There's a lot going on in the National League in the late 1930s where these Pirates teams they were always in the pennant, or there's a pennant race in which they get eliminated, but it's very close. And they had really great teams, but their pitching sucked, absolutely garbage. And if their pitching was actually good, you might actually have seen the Pirates in a World Series or two, or maybe three, um, instead of like say the Cardinals, which had like ten pennants to their name from like 1926 to like 1946. And that's a different story altogether. The Cardinals, too, because their owner is not in the Hall of Fame. Sam Breeden, he's got 10 pennants to his name and 6 World Series wins. And, Tom Yawkey got into the Hall of Fame before. I mean, Sam Breeden's not in, and you have to wonder like what's going on there. Obviously, like I've heard over the years that Tom Yawkey or somebody from that organization through the Cooperstown $10,000 check. I don't know if that's real. I don't, I've heard about it. It's a long-standing rumor because that really doesn't make a whole lot of sense that Tom Yawkey would get in before Colonel Jacob Rupert of the Yankees, who got in 2013, or Sam Breeden, who's got just a stellar record rebuilding the Cardinals, and then Crosley Powell, the owner of the Reds, still hasn't gotten in either, and he's got just an absolutely fantastic story all to himself, which I'll probably cover too at some point. Anyway, guys, I like to ramble about this kind of stuff. It's fun for me. I'm not so sure about you guys, but you guys hang around, and I really thank you very much for that. So let me know in the comment section below what you think, and I will talk to you in another video. Have a good one. Bye.